Welcome, everyone. Super excited about Ruth's presentation today. Give you a little bit of information on Ruth. She and I have been working together and doing things for a while now. As a matter of fact, Ruth was my client when I was going after my MCC. So my recording of me coaching Ruth is one that was part of that process for me. So very much on that journey. Ruth is super active. She's known as Project Motivator. Lots of expertise in the project management side of the house. She is also part of the team at CCC with the coach training. And so some of you may have had her, I'm not sure. She does an awesome job with that as well. Ruth, without further ado, I'm going to give it back over to you.
Thank you. And I always say, if you want to know about me, if you're curious, find me on LinkedIn because you can find out all about me. And if you're not curious, just don't waste your time. So it's wonderful to see you all here. And I'm really thrilled to be invited to come and speak. I did just want to say that being part of Kathy's MCC journey is one of my proudest moments, because she said to me, by the way, I have to do a recording for my MCC. And I was wondering, would you consider being my client? And I said, sure. Okay. She tells me what's involved. And it was such a great experience for me as a coach to really focus on who am I being as a client and just be a client, not be thinking about things in terms of a coaching point of view. And so, yeah, it was a proud moment for me when Kathy said, I've got my MCC. I was just like a teeny tiny teaspoon of that experience. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that is dear to my heart and was completely out of the blue. So some of you may know that in 2016, I burnt out, and Kathy said I have experience and expertise on the project management side of the house. It has taken me almost 6 years to get to the point where I can say the words project management without going sort of green around the gills, as my father would have said, because in 2016, I did something pretty drastic. I stood up at a meeting, an offsite meeting for a huge program, enterprise-wide program that we were doing. And when the CEO was doing his rah-rah speech, you know how they do, we're going to do this, and we're going to cross the finish line. And he had shown a little clip from Apollo 13, which is one of my favorite movies. And he's like, that's us. We're going to bring them back from the moon, and we're going to go live in March. And before I could stop myself, I stood up and said, I don't know what you're smoking, but I want some. And that's not a euphemism. I actually stood up and said that. You could have heard a pin drop in this meeting room. Well, needless to say, by the end of the day, there'd been some rearrangement of some of my responsibilities, let's just say, so it wasn't costless. I realized at that time, though, that I just couldn't do that anymore. So I left. My life partner, fortunately, who would normally say, don't leave until you've got something else to go to, he said, please leave, because either you're going to kill me or I'm going to kill you. Quit this job. It is almost literally killing you and killing us. So I did. I quit. Well, now what? What do I do? Who am I? At this point, I'd been a project manager for 25 years. And suddenly I'm not. Suddenly I can't even think about project managing. So I started to dabble with coaching. And now, after all this time, 6 years, lots of training, and most of the training I've done with Kathy, which has been absolutely fantastic, or Kathy and the team has been absolutely fantastic. Now I'm a coach, and I was thinking this morning, I was reading an article about burnout, because I coach a lot of people who are going through that burnout experience. And I thought this morning, I'm glad I burned out, because if I had navigated my project management existence without that experience, I would probably still be project managing. And I wouldn't have been part of Kathy's MCC journey. I wouldn't be coaching people in all different environments from all different organizations. And along the way, what I did was I did a study of project managers to see what character strengths they bring to the table. What do they typically show up with as a project manager? And we'll get into the character strengths in a moment. You're going to play around a little bit with some of yours. And what I found as I was working with these project managers was certain things seem to show up in project managers more than they do in other people. And one of those was this concept of hope. And we're going to get into what hope really is about. Then this idea of, really playing to your strengths. So whatever it is that makes you special in whatever you do, playing to that, honing those strengths, really being able to choose when to dial them up and dial them down. There's bravery in a good project manager, because so often we have to, maybe not the way I did it, so often we have to deliver news that other people don't really want to hear. And then there's a curiosity. As project managers, we don't do anything really ourselves. We orchestrate everybody else. We're very often portrayed as conductors. And so we orchestrate everybody else's effort. And so we don't know the answer to most things. We don't have the recipe for getting a project done. And as I've moved into coaching, I've realized that these components are part of the reason why transitioning into coaching felt really good to me, because this idea of connecting people to who they can be, who they will be, helping them to find that journey, that's a hopeful thing. We focus very much on what resources do you already have? What resources do you bring, Mr. or Miss client, that you've already got in your toolbox? Sometimes we're using that bravery because we challenge our clients and their thinking. If they've got habitual thoughts that they've always believed a certain thing, well, what if that isn't true? So what if the opposite was true? What would change for you? So there's a bravery there to bring other perspectives, not just get caught up in the client's story. And then there's curiosity. I think most coaches would say curiosity is key. It's curiosity for the client's benefit, though, which is a very subtle difference. I hear coaches sometimes saying, I'm curious, what was going on when this, and this? And sometimes it absolutely is to help the client figure out what's going on, what were they doing? And other times it is actually the curiosity of the coach. The coach just wants to know. And that is a time where our curiosity isn't really serving the client. We could get into ethics, but that's a whole different topic. So I bumped into this combination through the work I was doing with project managers and the studying I was doing with project managers. Now, as I predominantly coach and train people, predominantly coaching people, I've realized that these components are really key to me as a coach. They kind of frame my coaching style. So what I wanted to do today was to explore this with you and find out what these things mean to you. So if you do have any questions as we go along or comments or anything, please jump in and throw them in there. I'm not someone who feels like we shouldn't interrupt or that we can't sort of, take a short detour somewhere. So please put it in the chat or unmute yourself and let us know what you're thinking about. I just wanted to say that, I should have said that sooner. So my first question to you, and Kathy, just to mess with you, I'm going straight to poll 2, not poll 1. So my first question to you is, what does the word motivation mean to you?
I did not have a poll that I was setting up, so I'm going to ask everyone to type in chat
Okay,
box.
that's fine.
Let's go with chat. What does motivation mean to you?
Yeah. What does the word motivation mean to you?
So let's see what
the first 2 people who've answered mentioned drive. I like that. So inner drive, what drives you and inspires you? Yeah. Energy and inspiration to accomplish something and be happy doing it. Feels something deeply meaningful to me. have a desire to fulfill, wow, great definitions. So first of all, the next time I do a speaking engagement, can you all come with me? Because sometimes it's hard to get people to put things into the chat. Yeah, having energy and excitement around doing something, which doesn't always mean we're excited about the individual steps. We can be excited about where we're going to end up, right? So the individual things may be tedious and tiresome. At the same time, we stay motivated to do those things because they're going to lead us to this end result or this goal that we want. So lots of mentions of drive and energy and inspiration, meaningful. Maravi said that it's something meaningful to me, and that sort of compels you to get it done. So thank you very much for sharing that. So what I want to ask you now, and this is the definition from the Oxford English Dictionary, in case anyone hasn't guessed, I'm originally from the UK. I now live in North Carolina. This is the definition that they give, which is the reasons a person has for acting or behaving in a particular way. So it is that inspiration, that drive, what gives them meaning. I like all of your definitions better than the Oxford English Dictionary, just saying. So actually, I was going to do a breakout at this point to just put people in pairs to talk about, with that idea of what motivation is, what motivates you? And we'll just take 4 minutes so people can have a couple of minutes each to talk about that.
Okay, and you want them in groups of 2?
2. Mm-hmm.
Odd numbers, that's okay. So we will have an extra, that's all right. I am setting those up. I'm opening all the breakout rooms. Recording. Go ahead, Ruth.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. What came up for you as what motivates you? Anybody? Yes, Kelly. You unmuted, Kelly.
Oh, yeah. So Amy and I, kind of the same thing for us is just wanting to, learn new things, wanting to win. But yeah, pretty much the same thing.
Ooh, wanting to win.
Yeah.
Love that.
But I loved what you said, Kelly, because you said I'm competitive, but I want everyone to win. And I thought that was really neat how you said that. So like, it's not just about individual.
So wanting to win and everyone else to get the opportunity to win too.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
What about other people? What motivates you? Anybody?
Our group was pretty well, we've never met each other before, and we were all pretty aligned on the helping other people find their unique strengths, their unique path. It just gives us a lot of energy to help others.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very outwardly, outward focused, but at the same time, it was very much motivating for all of us.
Mm-hmm. What a great combination as well, that idea that you're focused on other people's journey and their well-being, and it's nourishing to us at the same time, right? I very rarely use that word, but that's what struck me as you were talking, was that it nourishes us to know that we've helped them along that path, right? Kimberly, you've unmuted. What's on your mind?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing that it's, walking with people on their journey and being able to be there to support them, and then everybody having an opportunity to celebrate the really positive outcomes, or, evaluate the outcomes and move forward from there. So definitely focusing on strengths and, individuality. For me, it's clients and families, and, watching them walk through a process, and not knowing where you're going to come out, but being where you need to be. And that sense of accomplishment, not just for me, because sometimes it, it feels good for me too, but as celebrating that with those who have really, done the journey. It's just nice to be part of that. For me, that's incredibly motivating.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And for me, one of the things, so all the things you've said really resonate with me. And one of the things is surprise. I love a good surprise. And I get surprises all the time. For example, it's not uncommon, and I don't know if you tell me whether you've experienced anything similar. I will quite often be coaching someone and I'll be sitting there and I'm like, I don't know, I don't really know where this is going. And I don't know how this is helping. and maybe it isn't helping, I'm questioning myself as I go along. And then maybe I get an email or a note or a message later saying, I really thought about what we talked about today, and it was so helpful because, and they give me an example. And the other day, this lady I was coaching, she sent me a 4-page email the next day that started, you really got me thinking a lot, and then went ... a lot. And she had all of these things that she felt had been prompted by that coaching session. And no one was more surprised than me, because at the end of that coaching session, I was like, wow, that really just didn't seem to go anywhere at all. So I love that surprise when you find that something, some question you asked, some comment you made, some reframing that you gave, just turn things for them so that they could look at things in a different way and approach something in a different way. I just think that's so exciting. And you never really quite know when it's going to happen, or I don't. Maybe that says more about my coaching than anything else. But anyway, so going back to my 4 steps. So we had the hopefulness, strengths, bravery, and curiosity. We're going to do a little bit, and we'll step up the pace a little bit, because obviously we're going to be short time. But we're going to do a little bit with each of these things, just to experience and understand them a little better, to be able to think about how we can engage these tools with our clients, for ourselves, with our families, whoever it might be. So this gentleman here is Shane Lopez. He's one of my all-time heroes, positive psychology hero. Sadly, he's not with us anymore. He wrote a book called Making Hope Happen. And in that book, he brings lots of examples of people who have experienced really difficult situations, maintained a positive outlook, by which I mean not everything's okay, everything in the garden is rosy, nothing like that, but this expectation that they are going to be able to take steps and make changes that will improve their situation, even if it's just incrementally. And so he studied all of these people, and he, and before him, Rick Snyder, who was his mentor, was Shane Lopez's mentor. They came up with this idea that hope isn't this kind of, it'll all be all right tomorrow, it'll all work out all right on the night. It's a combination of seeing a possibility in the future and believing that you can make a difference, make it more likely that it is going to turn out that way. They call it the optimism and agency. So you've got this vision of the future, and you've got this sense that I can make a difference, sometimes small, to the outcome. I've got some control, some agency in this. And I think this is so relevant to coaching, because many people have that sort of, oh, well, maybe I can get to here. But the questions we really get into are, well, how are you going to get from where you are today to where you want to be? And so we're really helping them to build that agency. So there's a really quick little exercise. I want all of you to just think about something that you visualize for the future, and how far in the future you're thinking of. It's entirely up to you. It could be the end of today. It could be the end of next year. It could be 10 years from now. But something that you visualize in your future. And then the next step is to think about what's one step that you can take, that you will take, that will move you closer to that outcome you're thinking of. And then put a date on it. When are you going to implement that step? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes quiet, or a minute or so quiet, to think about that. This visualize the future, a step you'll take to move closer towards that future, and put a date on when you're going to do that. Kate, I see you speaking, but I'm not sure if you mean us to hear, because you're muted.
No, I'm not. I'm not speaking. I'm just kind of affirming.
Okay, all right.
In silence.
Okay, just wanted to be sure that
Thank
there
you.
wasn't something that you wanted to ask. Okay. So does everyone have their visualization, their action, and a time frame? So as you think about that, about taking that step and moving incrementally towards your goal, you can share in the chat or you can just unmute yourself because we're a relatively small group. What's a word to describe how that feels? Freedom. Wow, that's a big word. And Marafi's wearing the freedom t-shirt. Yeah. Fulfilling. Joyful, grateful. So going back to our thoughts about motivation, what you've just done is you've thought about your goal. You've chosen a step that you can take. You've put a time frame on when you will take it. Terrifying growth. Yeah, sometimes there's that sort of push-pull, right, of, well, that's super exciting. And, oh, wow, what if that comes to pass? It could be really overwhelming. So it's not always 100% one thing or the other. Release, we've got excited. All you did was think about it and put a time frame on it. That's a form of motivation, to ignite that excitement and optimism and that urgency, that feeling of, I want to do this thing now. I want to take that step. I want to get on with it. So that hopefulness, as you're thinking about hopefulness with clients, how do we engage that hopefulness and how do we ground it, help them to ground it so that it's not just a la vision of the future, it's actually something they can move themselves towards. My second one is be strong. Now, there are lots of ways that we can talk about strengths. Anticipation, that's a favorite word of mine, Julie, thank you. There's lots of strengths that we can talk about. We've got talents, you know, those things that we just seem to be able to turn our hand to. Like we know people who just seem to be able to pick up any sport and, you know, they have a talent at it. We've got skills, which are those things that we've actually honed. Kelly was talking earlier about learning new things and developing new knowledge. So sometimes we can take a talent and we learn more about it and we actually develop that talent into something that we can apply at will, and it's a skill. We have those things we're passionate about. It just seems like when those things come up, we have this energy around those topics. My particular favorite to work with is character strengths, via character strengths. I actually, full disclosure, I did actually used to work for them for a period of time. It's fully researched. That's one of the reasons I love it, is because it's researched, evidence-based. There's over 800 studies verifying the theory behind it. And so I really feel like it's well-grounded. It's also something that seems to click with people. And that first thing, that hope of being, which was a vision of the future, plus an idea of how to accomplish it, that's one of the character strengths. That some people can really leverage that sort of almost on autopilot. So we're going to do a little experiment. You can go and take your survey. It's free. The basic survey is free and you get your ranking of 24 character strengths. You can also do it the way we're going to do it now and just sort of think through, what do you think your strengths are? And I'll put the list up. Here are the 24 strengths. So as you look at this list, what do you think they are? As you think about feedback that you've had from other people, what do you think other people might say to you? They recognize as being something that you leverage all the time. So what I want you to do for this exercise is to choose one of these strengths that you feel is absolutely core to you. Just one, and there may be many, just pick one though, and focus on that one. What is that strength that you just feel like it's synonymous with you? And then think about, how does it feel when you're using that strength, when you're expressing that strength? Okay, so now here's the real challenge. Imagine that you can't use that strength for 30 days. If you love to learn something, you can't or you're curious about things, you can't look things up on the internet, can't get a book out of the library about it, you can't ask someone that you think might already know. You just have to continue in ignorance, Julia. No, thank you. So 30 days without that strength. If it's kindness, you can't do something for another person. You can't see them struggling and you offer a helping hand. Judgment, I want to clarify, is critical thinking, not being judgmental. So judgment is that critical thinking. You don't get to weigh either side of an argument. You're just going to jump in with whatever comes to mind. And you say, no. So this is the exercise of subtraction. And what it does is it reminds us of how important certain things are to us. And in this case, we're doing character strengths, but it can be behaviors or whatever. And I see that people are already expressing the answer to what my next question was going to be, was what are some words to describe how you feel when you are without that core strength of yours? That for 30 days, it's not available to you. So Mika or Mamaika says that without perseverance, I can't motivate others effectively. Empty, frustrated. We've got 2 people already who've just been like, no, I'm not playing with this particular game. Disconnected, less than whole, lost. And we hear that all the time. When people actually think about taking away a core element of themselves, it's as though they've disappeared. With one caveat, I do occasionally get people saying, oh, that would be a blissful relief. So I had a group one day where one person said her top strength was kindness. And she said it would be like a month's vacation because I wouldn't have this compulsion to do things for other people, to put myself out for them, to help them. That is sometimes an indication that the person may be overusing that strength, that they're not balancing it with other things, right? That they're a people pleaser or whatever it is. That's an opportunity in itself to explore. You know, we expect that people are going to go, oh no, I can't imagine being this person. I'm very high in curiosity. And there are times where I'm like, I would give my eye teeth to be able to turn it off, because it means I have to put a lot of effort in staying focused, because, you know, something shiny is over here and I want to go and find out what that shiny thing is. I have stuff to do. So being able to turn off my curiosity at will would be really, really helpful. So I just put that out there because the first time it happened to me when I was debriefing a group, I was like, oh, that that didn't have the result that I expected. And then at the same time, it gave us this opportunity to look at things from another point of view. Say, are you being deliberate in your use of these strengths and these things that come to you so naturally? Are you using them in a way that is truly beneficial to you and as a coach to your clients? So we've done the be hopeful, and we expressed that sort of exciting, positive, energized, little bit tentative feeling. We've thought about what it would be like to be without a core strength of ours. It was completely made up. You can have it back. I'm giving it back to you right now, unless you don't want it. So just remind yourself of how exciting and positive and helpful it is to have that strength that you were giving up for 30 days. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to think about bravery. We're going to put all of this together at the end. So we've got our hopefulness, we've got our strength, and as coaches, we typically help our clients to mine for strength. So that's very much aligned with what we do. Bravery. What's going on with bravery? So very often, and I hear this a lot from coaching clients, they think of bravery as people who will run into a burning building, basically people who will run towards something when everybody else is running away. That's what they think of as brave. And that they don't worry about it. There's no fear. It's just like they're compelled, motivated, right, to go and take care of others or whatever it might be. In actual fact, studies show that bravery has nothing to do with experiencing fear, as in you can and do very often experience fear and discomfort. It is the ability to weather that and do the thing anyway. That is actually a more complete definition of bravery. So not to devalue firefighters or soldiers or any of those people we think of that express physical bravery. If you talk to them, and there's a researcher called Robert Biswas-Diener who has a book about courage, the courage quotient. He interviewed different people who were in those positions, and for the most part, what they expressed was, well, I'm trained for that. I've been taught how to do it as safely as possible. I have the skills for it. I don't suggest you do it. I know how to do it. And thank you for sharing that, Kimberly. Running into a burning building is heroism. In a completely different webinar, we can get into the difference between heroism, bravery, and courage, because that can be quite an interesting topic as well. But so Robert Biswas-Diener did all of this research. And as I say, these people that from the outside, witnesses will very often look and say, "Ooh, that's brave. I wouldn't do it." For the person actually experiencing it, they didn't feel brave. It was just like, this is what I do and I know how to do it. So what I want you to do now is to think of a time when you were maybe nervous about doing something, you had anxiety about, maybe it's performance anxiety, you were uncomfortable, maybe you felt that motivation to say, you know what, actually, I'm not going to do this. I think I'm going to avoid it. And you did it anyway. So taking a moment to reconnect with that. So for example, I will share with you that I love to speak and I hate to speak. What is it that you said, Maravi? It's like terrifying something. Terrifying growth. Yeah. I'm terrified and excited in equal measure. And before I do a speaking engagement, in the few minutes before, I'm very often thinking about ways that I could legitimately tell the person, oh, you know what, I'm not going to be able to come today. And I push through, because on the other side of it is conversation. There's sharing things like you're sharing in this chat. On the other side of it, I'm going to look at this and say, well, that's another group of people. Current question shattered. Maravi, do you want to explain what that means?
As soon as I typed it, I said, you shouldn't have typed that because you don't want to talk. Because I am one who, if I can avoid going into something fearful, I will. I'll give it a process. And you said recent, so I trusted a process, which literally and right now it broke my heart. So just feeling like shattered from it. So I think sometimes it's great to do that, and sometimes it's like, but I'm learning something. So that's good. It's that, ebb and flow.
Well, and sometimes there's the yes and, right? That when we do something that's really difficult, it can be very draining. It can leave us at the end feeling as though our energy has been sapped away. And one of the definitions, so bravery is another one of the character strengths. One of the definitions of what they call signature strengths, which are supposed to be those go-to ones that we were exploring before, is that they're energizing, effortless, and essential. So we really tackled the essential, the essence piece when we did that subtraction. The other two things, though, about, so there's the essence, it's me, I take it away and I'm not me anymore. There's the effortless, it's like it comes automatically, we almost don't think about it. And there's the energizing, that part of that definition is that when we use that strength, we feel good in the moment. And I have been having discussions, when I was working at VIA, I had discussions with the researchers at VIA. As somebody who is high in bravery, I completely disagree that that's part of the elements of bravery. I think bravery is utterly exhausting. It is not energizing. It's energizing in retrospect. So when you've had time to process and think through and can reflect back, then you have that opportunity to go, oh, look what I did. Look how I pushed through. But in the moment, it is hard work. So I like what you said, Maravi, and thank you for sharing, and Julie's added, when it's over, feels darn good when it's over, right? So when you reflect back on one of these times when you were afraid and you did the thing anyway, and you've had some time to move on from it and replenish your energy, what's a word to describe how you feel then? One word. Accomplished. Ooh, too accomplished. Confident, clarity. Yeah, I love the use of the word confident, because it reminds us that we can do things, right? And that can help us tackle things in the future. Clarity, relief. Yeah, sometimes there's the old joke that my father used to tell about the guy who goes to the doctor and says, I've got a headache, and he's banging his head against the wall. And the doctor says, why don't you just stop banging your head against the wall? And when he does, it's blissful relief. Sometimes we do things to get to that point on the other side where it's like, well, that's over. I've done that. I can check that box to say it's done. I hate to go to the dentist. Going to the dentist is like that for me. It's that once I've been and I've had everything done, it's blissful relief. Grateful, you feel grateful and safe. Phil, would you be willing to say a little more about, you chose the word safe? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, I can talk about that. It was a climb in Colorado that required a really significant rappel off of a summit, and a storm had come in and the rope got stuck. And I came up with a strategy of how to address the stuck rope so that we could finish the rappel and get down. So when that was done, it took about, 35 minutes to execute that. But when it was done, I felt like, okay, we're safe. We're on our way back to the trailhead.
Wonderful. So it's sort of that, I heard the relief in there as well, like you managed to get to where you need to be, but safe. What a great choice of words, because sometimes when we're having to push through a really difficult situation and we're afraid and working through it anyway, then at the end of it, we are getting to safety, that when it's over, we're going to be able to breathe easy and know that we're on solid ground, right? Reinforced in your abilities, Darlene, love that one. It reminds us of what we can do, right? And actually, there's a great book by Todd Kashdan that came out earlier this year called The Art of Insubordination. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. It's actually a book, a different book that he and Robert Biswas-Diener, who I mentioned before, co-authored, which is called The Upside of Your Dark Side. I'm mixing up my two books. The Upside of Your Dark Side by Robert Biswas-Diener and Todd Kashdan. And one of the things they go into in that book is that the science of bravery, in effect, because what they talk about is that we can all tolerate more stress than we think, that we can all tolerate more difficult situations than we imagine we'll be able to. And if you think through experiences that you've had in your life, there are very often things where you look back and you say, I don't even know how I got through that. Well, you got through it a day at a time, an hour at a time, a step at a time, incrementally, right? You didn't get through the whole thing in one go. You did it incrementally. One of my clients the other day was describing that 10 years ago, she broke both ankles when she fell off the sidewalk. And she described what the experience was like. It was like a year's recovery with surgeries and things like that. And she looked back and I said, I don't know how I did that. Well, she didn't do it in a year's effort. She did each day as she went along, right? I remember the why I did it in the first place and kept going. Yeah. So reconnecting with that purpose, that meaning, that motivation that made you set out on that difficult journey in the first place, right? So lots of benefits to being able to reflect back on even difficult experiences that you have weathered. And as I say, in that book, there's quite there's a chapter about the whole thing about how we can remind ourselves that we can actually weather much more than we think, and that can help us tackle more difficult problems. So I particularly like that book. Curiosity is our last thing. I don't think most coaches would have difficulty in expressing the usefulness of curiosity with coaching clients. But in this case, we're going to get into what it really is. So it's this interest that leads to inquiry. So not just observing that something is interesting and stimulating. It's about actually pursuing that, taking action on the basis of that, right? So noticing something and then going, okay, I'm going to look deeper into that. I'm going to ask more about it. I'm going to research it further. So when you think back over the last week, we're meeting on a Friday. Think back over the last week about something that piqued your interest during the week that you didn't follow up on. Something that you're still sitting there wondering, or you're thinking, I wish I'd asked that question. So just think back over the last week. Maybe it was that magic coaching question that after the coaching session was over, you thought, that's the question I should have asked. And as you think about that thing that's been left hanging, what's one step that you can take now to find out more, to find out the answer to the question you had? Where will you go to find out? Who will you ask? Who will you consult? We tend to think of curiosity as something that occurs in the moment, and there's a lot of discussion around the difference between curiosity and love of learning. So curiosity tends to be more sort of spontaneous in the moment, shiny new thing. That's how most people describe it, right? Is that you see a shiny new thing and it's like, oh, what's that? And you have to look. Love of learning is a more sort of more of a process, and very often love of learning is also associated with love of sharing what you know. So being willing to teach or to coach other people through learning similar material because you see the value of what you've learned and you want other people to have that value as well, the win-win-win that we talked about earlier. So they're slightly different, very often related, so that you start off by being curious about something and then realize that you've got a deeper interest in it than that. But people tend to think of curiosity as I'm curious in the moment and then I'm done. The truth is that we can rekindle that curiosity. If there was something we were curious about and we just kind of let it go, we can reflect back on it and think, well, how do I feel about that now? And if we're still curious, follow up on that curiosity. Coaching to me is like that because it's a very forgiving thing, right? But very often when you start out in coaching, it's like you feel as though if you didn't cover every single thing and ask questions about every single thing that the client brought up in the session, that you've missed something. That my experience has shown me that the longer I coach is that something important will come up again. And it's good for me to make a note that, oh yeah, there was that's something that we could have looked deeper into, and then just sit back and watch what happens. Does this person bring the topic up again? In which case it's not too late. We can have another go. Or maybe it seems important to us and it doesn't seem important to them. And it just was a passing fancy or a passing thought. So then, we can be curious about that. Does it show up again? Are they still interested in that topic? Is there more that we can do with that? So keeping that curiosity as a cumulative thing and sort of monitoring over time to see whether a topic is still of value and of interest to the client is another way to handle those things that it feels like we just missed, or if the session is so full of stuff that you can't get to everything. So what we've done is we've been exploring motivators, right? So we did the hopeful thing. We chose something that we want to focus on in the future. And we put a time frame on one activity that was going to move us towards that outcome. And then we described how that feels. So think about how you might do that with a client. We explored character strengths and what it might feel like to give up a character strength. Thank you, Julie. What it would be like to give up something that is core to yourself for a period of time. and the possibility that we may lean too much on a particular strength to the point that it is actually doing us a disservice. So again, how can you explore those things with your clients to help them understand what's in their toolbox and how to use it effectively, and to recognize when maybe they're not doing the best for themselves by the way they're using a particular strength that they lean on a lot? How can you get your clients to think about times when they tolerated more discomfort than they thought they could, and help them understand how even difficult things that are ahead of them now can be accomplished because they can tolerate that discomfort? And then thinking about how we can use curiosity and how we can pique curiosity in our clients. So what's something that they've been puzzled about? What's something that they've been asking themselves about? What's something that they've been wondering about that they haven't taken any step to resolve that curiosity? And what do they want to do about it? Now, the original thing was I was showing this to project leaders. I need to change this slide because it's occurred to me that it really is the foundation of how I coach. People are often asking, you know, what's your coaching model or whatever. I don't particularly have a style of coaching in that regard. I realized though that it's that motivation, connecting people to what motivates them and reminding them of when they've taken steps, reminding them of when they've accomplished things before, reminding them of how exciting that can feel, how reinforced they can feel when they accomplish something that is difficult. So we've got 7 minutes left. If anyone's got any questions or thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them. I do have a challenge for you over the next 7 days to do with character strengths. You can use character strengths themselves, and I can send a handout that people can have to be able to see the character strengths. It really isn't important what you call them though. But one of the things that we know from the research is that when we spot strengths in people, explain what it is that made us think of that strength and tell them why that is valuable. It's very reinforcing and helps them to develop. And it has a ripple effect. They tend to start doing it with other people as well. So I encourage you for the next 7 days, even if you're only doing things online or whatever it might be, you can even do this when you're watching a movie or something, is to identify a character, see the strength in it. How would you describe that strength? And you can pick a word and say that seems like hope, or that seems like love, or whatever it is, or you can describe the strength in more sort of layers of what the components are that describe that strength. Explain to the person, or at least to yourself, what was the behavior that you saw that caused you to think of that strength? Because that's something that the person's going to need to know, is if they want more people to see them that way, what's the behavior that is going to send that message to people? And then why does it matter? Why do we care? Why did you even take the time to make that observation? What is it about them expressing that strength that you really appreciate? So that's your challenge for the next 7 days. And by the end of the or at the end of the 7 days, think about how that feels. Do that reflection on how has it felt to do that? And what have you noticed? What have you noticed happening as a result of that activity? So I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for being in the session. Thank you for all your great answers. Kathy, if it's possible to have a copy of the chat, I would love that, because there were some wonderful answers to the questions there that I'd love to keep for all eternity. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, if you can scan this code and that will connect you to me on LinkedIn. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. And if you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share with me, feel free to email me. And with that, I will say thank you very much. Julie said she's going to recommend a newsletter by Rob Walker, Art of Noticing. Sounds interesting. I'm curious. So thank you very much for sharing that, Julie. And I just want to say thank you all for being here on a Friday, middle of the day. For me, it is the middle of the day. And if you do have any questions, please let me know. I love to explore these things further. So thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, for anyone who wants to save the chat box, what you can do is in the bottom right-hand corner underneath the chat box, there are 3 dots. And if you click on those 3 dots, you can click to save the chat, and anything that's in there, when you click that, will be saved onto your computer. So you will have that chat. So that's one way you can do it. I will be emailing a link to the recording to everyone. We'll get this posted on YouTube. That way, if you want to come back and go through it again, you'll have that opportunity. That'll be available. And when I do that, I will CC Ruth so that you will all have her email and be able to get a hold of her as well.
And before you send out the recording, Kathy, I'll send you the list of character strengths so that people can use that for their 7-day activity. So you can send that out with the email if that's okay.
Perfect. Yes, I will. Absolutely. And Marta B, Ruth gave us a link to where you can take the assessment. Ruth, do you have the ability to copy that into the chat box as
I
well?
do, yeah. Hold on. And the answer is yes, I do debrief the assessment. And Maravi, because of the debrief you did with me a little while ago, I've changed the way I do it. So always learning something new. So
Excellent. And Ruth, thank you so much. It's been a fabulous conversation. A lot of good stuff out of that one.
thank you. I'm glad people enjoyed it.
Appreciate that. There you go. And now you all have the link where you can take that free assessment. So, wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Other questions for Ruth before we close up?
No, this has, great processing, well presented, Ruth. I mean, I didn't expect anything else. This was super, super helpful, especially in this moment. So I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that I was a part, happy to have met everybody here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Making me
Awesome.
blush. Thanks very much, everybody. Do stay in touch and let me know your thoughts and questions and ideas, and have a great rest of the day.
Great. Thank you, Ruth.
Fabulous.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you,
Everyone.
Ruth. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.